but returning home for a lot of ethnicities, color, had a different meaning because segregation was all around, and segregation is still all around today, and hopefully we can change it, and hopefully these young people can do it for us, because I don't think we're doing such a good job of it. Thank you, Francis. Joachim Hoene, born in Heilbronn, Germany, near Stuttgart. He was with the Luftwaffe and flew a Messerschmitt. His father flew in World War I with a German ace that some of you might be familiar with named Baron Richthofen. And he was commander of a bomber group during World War II, where his father flew the Heinkel 111, a twin-engine bomber. The end of the war did not see liberation for Joe. Yes, Joe, because that was an American when he was incarcerated as a POW following the end of German surrender in April. The gentleman who was in charge of Joe couldn't pronounce his real name, so they gave him the nickname Joe, and it's actually stuck ever since, because he told me to call him Joe. But I can't pronounce his name right either, the first name. But following the war, Joe remained in Germany, and he basically became part of the reconstruction of Germany in the infrastructure. Joe came to the United States in 1956. Joachim Hoene.
My dear friends, I really never talk too much about this bad or the worst time in my life as a prisoner of war. Grew up in a family which my dad was a famous pilot and hero in World War I, and naturally as a boy I was dreaming about to become one too. As I grew, finally ended up as glider pilot and volunteered to fly the rocket plane Me-163, which I didn't tell my dad about it, and he raised holy hell because half of the pilots get killed on takeoff. I made it twice, and then we ran out of fuel and called us Air Force Infantry, and ended up down in Stuttgart, Böblingen, and we had to walk on the Autobahn all the way to Munich and try to slow Patton and his advanced tanks down. Well, I finally got sick and tired of walking and dragging all this ammunition and guns. We never really got into a fight with Patton, because I thank to God, our colonel, who was more or less a real decent fellow, pulled us back all the time. He didn't want to have these young guys like me, about 17 years old. He didn't want to have them slaughtered for nothing. We all knew, he knew, we didn't, but he knew that war was lost. So, but anyway, I got tired of walking at night and fighting in daytime. Fell asleep in the ditch several times at night. And they had some organization, they call it the Werwolf, and I volunteered for it. And you get overrun by the American front line. You get a Panzerfaust, a bicycle, and a machine gun, a little machine pistol, and you have to fight behind the lines and do some nasty things. So that was not my taste neither. I wanted the bicycle and the machine gun. So that night, we ran into an American howitzer group, and they had a good time. They had a fire going, and they must have gotten hold of some liquor there, or schnapps, and anyway, they had no guards out there. And my buddy, he wanted to play hero and go in there and shoot the Panzerfaust. It would have killed a few. And I told him, I said, you're a big old idiot, a young idiot. The war is over, let's save our lives and get the heck out of here before they shoot us. Well, he wanted to play hero. I had him whack him one, and finally I got away from him and threw the Panzerfaust in a wet ditch, which, you know, you couldn't use it after that no more. I ended up then in the woods, and till I met another German soldier, and he had the bright idea, or told me a lie, something, that you go down in that little village there, and the Americans will write you out a pass, and they send you home. Well, I believed him. I went in a little village and there was no American. There was a bunch of ex-French POWs which we used for farm labor. But these guys were real nice to me. This is the first time I had a decent meal and a decent bed to sleep in. And so I finally crawled in a nice feather bed, naked. And I felt good till in the morning I hear some big old banging at the door and hands up and all kind of commotion. And there came a couple of GIs and opened the door, and here I was naked on the floor there, and they're laughing. I really had to laugh about the situation. It was comical. Well, I let me dress, and then they put me on a tank behind the turret and took me to a prison camp, which was an old cavalry caserne where they had a bunch of horses still had and stables, and at least we had a roof over the head and some straw to sleep on. Well, when I got in there, they had a big old Mexican sarge who was in charge of that camp, and he was saying, hey, anybody speaks English around here? Well, I could speak a little because I wasn't too good a pupil, and sure, I liked the language, and I read all of Tom Sawyer's and Huckleberry Finn in English, and the Wood, Kipling, the Jungle Book. But my grades in high school, I couldn't brag about them. So, anyway, we got to be friends, and I was his interpreter. And for a while, everything was fine, till all of a sudden they had to move all this camp down to Heilbronn. Now, Heilbronn, they had about 500,000 German prisoners. A big camp with streets and everything in there, but no food. And I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I learned to eat grass which tasted good, and this is no lie. I ate coffee grounds. I tried to get some work going once in a while. They need some cleanup crews and clean out latrines. I did it, and till I finally met my friend and a buddy from our high school class, Carl Hotte. And all of a sudden we had a call in there that we are supposed to go to France, we young ones, and work in the coal mine. I told Carl, I said, I'm not going to go there in France and work in the coal mine. So what I did, as American prisoners, we always got plenty of soap. I don't know why we always had plenty of soap. We had hardly any water to wash with, you know. I ate a piece of soap. Well, it was drastic. I ended up in a hospital, and then they fed me beans on top of that. So between the latrine and my little old bed there, I was a constant come and go there for the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, I watched on the street going by, they had several platoons of German prisoners, and they took them to the camp where they discharge camp. And but they had Hawaiian guards on them. That's the first time I heard the pineapple soldiers, you know, no offense. Anyway, if I watched them, I got behind the last one and the next bunch, and the guy was counting there, and he counted 3 times, and he always had one too many. He finally gave up, said, to heck with it, get in there, you know. So I came in the camp to where they discharged you, and we had to go in front of a captain who we had to tell him his whole life, my whole life story and everything. Where he said, finally, you get over there in this other camp, and in about 4 weeks you can go home. Well, that was another big mistake, because meanwhile they changed the armies, and another army took over the camp, and they forgot about us. So I ended another couple of months in camp. Meanwhile, I met met a man in there that became my close friend, and believe me, friends, I was devastated, morally devastated, because all my dreams just went out the window in a big puff. Germany was destroyed. Food was very, very scarce. I had no clothing. I had a pair of little shorts and an old raincoat. And so I asked Eric, I asked Eric, what in the world I'm going to do now? Everything, my whole future is shot. And he looked at me and said, you're an idiot. I said, look around you, whole Germany is destroyed. Learn the trade as a bricklayer, learn the trade as a carpenter. We need young men who rebuild Germany. Well, I followed his advice. They discharged me finally, and I had to walk about 50 miles before I got to my hometown. I was a sad figure there, really. And so, of course, I got sick for another week. I still think I was working on that soap there. Anyway, I signed up as a bricklayer apprentice boy, and got I'm certified to be a bricklayer after 3 years. And I worked in Germany as a bricklayer and concrete finisher, but in wintertime when I couldn't work, I went to the engineering school. Now they got two different engineers. I was in that field engineering school where they needed only 4 semesters to be a field engineer. So while I was unemployed in wintertime, I got my engineering degree. And things were looking up then. I had a motorcycle, we had decent food to eat, and my mother and I, we had a nice little apartment there. Till my uncle in Houston, he got her brother, my uncle, and he got a wild idea that since my parents divorced, he wanted my mother coming over to Houston and live with him and his wife. So she did, and I was stuck with all the inheritance from her. I still got the piano over here. It's about over 100-year-old piano, and china and silver and stuff. And now what I'm going to do with that stuff here, you know? So I thought, I stored it. And I finally went. I got on the Dutch freighter. It took me 3 weeks to get to Houston, seasick. And I had already a job waiting for me. My sister worked for the big construction company, and they needed an engineer in concrete. So I had 1 day to rest, and the second day I had to go to work in Galveston to build a bridge to Pelican Island. And really and truly, it was a completely different world for me, you know, here at Galveston. And I had a labor force was black, I had Mexicans. Then the white labor force resented me as a boss, because I was, you know, after all, a dumb crowd, you know. Well, we got along, but still there was a lot of resentment in there, till we finally, one Saturday, we had a nice party over in one of the Galveston bars. We all got high and drunk and became friends.